President Obama calls his $500,000 limit on executive compensation a first step in maintaining tight control over taxpayer bailout money. But is this controversial move really going to help? Early Show national correspondent Jeff Glor has the story.
Any bank getting a big bailout from the federal government won't be allowed to pay a top executive more than $500,000 a year. An ice-cold splash of water on a system where the average executive was making 400 times more than the average worker.
We're going to be demanding some restraint in exchange for federal aid.
If companies want to pay more, it has to come in stock that can't be cashed in until taxpayers are paid back.
He's firing a shot across everybody's bow to say, I will not be embarrassed in front of the American public if I'm going to try to help out.
These rules do not require congressional approval, but they're also not retroactive. So it applies only to companies getting the second half of the government's $700 billion bailout. Jeff Glor, CBS News, New York.
We're joined this morning by Steve Forbes, President and CEO of Forbes Incorporated. Good morning, Steve.
Good to be with you.
Good to be with you. First of all, do you think that we should be outraged at these executive salaries? Should we be outraged that in 2006, for example, the average CEO of a big company made as much in a day as the average American worker made in a year? Or is it just capitalism?
Well, if the performance is actually long-term performance, yes, if you deliver, you should get paid, whether it's in sports or anything else. Problem was in Wall Street it was based on what we now know to be assets that turned out to be bad. So yes, there should be outrage, but there should be outrage too at the Federal Reserve that let this bubble go on as long as it did by printing too much money, Fannie and Freddie for inflating this thing, and then crazy accounting rules, which as we speak today are destroying banks and hindering their ability to recover.
Do we help or hurt the situation by capping the salaries at $500,000 for these CEOs of distressed firms that look for money from the government?
Well, if the people are angry at what has been done, you should have a thorough change of management and then have incentives in there, long-term incentives, to make sure they do the right job in the future. But in politics, there's a rule called the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules. Washington is now making the rules. But what's going to go beyond simply CEO pay or top executive pay, it's also now going to be, you're going to see it in what banks get bailouts. What loans should you make? Should you be allowed to make loans overseas? All of this is now going to get enmeshed in politics and gets around. The real problem is regulations, accounting regulations, which are destroying banks gratuitously. Most of the losses the banks have taken have been book losses, not cash losses. This is insane.
Is there anything about this that worries you? Is there anything about the government getting involved in setting limits that strikes you as too far to the left of capitalism?
Well, again, when you get in the hands of the government, just resign yourself. Things are going to happen to you that you're not going to like. When you go to handout, rules are going to come with it. It's not going to be an ATM where you get the money for free and then you go on. You're going to have to pay a price for it. So you can't have
one and not the other?
You can't have one without the other, so get used to it. But the thing is, what really should be looked at is how do we get the banking system working again? And that's what they really haven't addressed, and they're about to do something either through this bad bank or through loan guarantee or through guarantees of assets, of toxic assets. They're going to hurt the recovery instead of enhancing it.
Wall Street usually finds a way to get around these rules. Do you think that it'll stick anyway?
Well, I think if you're in the hands of the government, even if you find ways around the rules, you're not going to want to have to be hauled before a congressional committee, finger wagging, you failed, you did this, you did that. So in effect, you're not going to have any incentive to find ways around it because you're going to get hung politically.
All right. Thank you, Steve Forbes. As always, pleasure having you here.
Thank you.